class. This is Nai Coach, and today's lesson is going to be talking about the emotive spectrum and neutralizing spectrum that humans have, what powers do that, and how they interplay with each other. This is a second gear cue, the emotive and neutralizing spectrum, the expressing and curtaining, as we often call it. So you'll need to be familiar with the pod powers and how they interrelate in a basic mathematical way, because when we talk in that context, this will be comparing and contrasting powers from two different quadrants. In this case, it is the discernment quadrants, including the objective discernment, the dynamic steering of G and Z, and then the adaptive discernment, the subjective discernment, which is Zhi and Zai. You'll need to understand these earlier kinds of material as far as like gear one and those kinds of relationships, basic human design stuff, because it stacks here. For example, you'll need to be talking about, because you're talking about both discernment quadrants, that includes directive and adaptive. So you'll want to watch the Yang Yin gesturing filming at least and human design to understand that. And then actually you're also bringing in objective and subjective, so you'll have to have an understanding of that. Oh yes, you'll need to understand the resonator. There's an episode on that, on the two resonators, what they're about, and then the two articulators, because again, that will be interplayed on with what's going on with the emoting and neutralizing of expression overall for Emojo. As always, you need clean samples. I'm going to be giving out some mathematics, I'm going to give out some poetic verbiage, but then you must line it up with actual live, samples, real human beings, video, media that you can actually connect. You can connect the mathematics with the poetic description with real natural law phenomenon, real occurrences. Also, besides needing to have real clean samples in which to connect to the theory, within that you'll need to do counterpointing. You'll need to counterpoint, for example, in emoting, you're of course going to have the Zhi versus G emoters. You're going to actually have the momentum and modulation emoters, as well as neutralizers. So all those relationships play off one another. This way they play off each other, it's necessary for understanding because they're part of a whole. So you kind of need to see, Zhi with Z, G with Zai, Zai compared to Zhi, G compared to Z. Basically, all the different powers can be reflected off of the other 7 powers for synonymy orientation and contextualizing. But here we'll just start with discernments. So this is dealing a lot when you're talking about emoting and neutralizing. You're talking about cynicism, because it is the decision-making processes and what they make decisions on and how they go about doing it. That's what cynicism is comprised of. Emoting is basically whenever emotional expression comes over the face. This can be important because some people are confused here. This can be positive or negative. This can be happy or sad. It can be angry or lethargic. But you're expressing how you feel, as opposed to the lack of expression. Now, what causes this to happen? Let's start with the emoting first. With emoting, the general, holistic concept of emoting, that actually comes from the values-based channel of the psyche for all humans, and thus the collective as totality. That's how humans emote. So it is the processes going on that cause the emoting. So that would be, in mathematical terms, you're actually going to have directive, objective, values-based discernment. And then back here, you're going to actually have adaptive, subjective, values-based discernment. So it's the values-based discernment aspect, the values, but that's kind of mathematical sounding. So let's give a little flesh to these value-based criteria for making decision. Emoting holistically, and this actually is for understanding the power. The power mathematically is a priority. Emoting, well, not a priority, it's a compound. It's a compound. We call this like the compound, like the momentum power, but actually any two powers is a kind of a compound. The composition relationship is also a compound. But there's another compound, inspirational compound. In this case, the inspirational relationship, that compound of Zhai and Ji, that is what causes emoting in humans. That's what causes the raising up of the emotive expression in the face. So whenever a human does that, they'll either do Ji or Zhai, but they're actually connected to the other that they don't have consciously, Zhai or Ji, and they're unconscious, and they're connected to all of the Zhai and Ji with the rest of the humans. So this is a process of emoting. So what is this process? Let's give it some poetic verbiage. The concepts of the people and of harmony. When engaging in those psychic activities, that causes emoting. This has to do with things such as sense of community, hope, personal connection, expectancy, social awareness, idealism, personal consideration, sentiment, integrity, virtue, code of conduct, purity, tribal relationships, gut reaction, cultural dynamics, acid testing, interpersonal relationships, essence reading, group dynamics, attunement, etiquette, empathy, diplomacy, communing, team building, resonating, shepherding, internalizing, rituals, conviction, collective values, investment, charm, devotion, persuasion, sacrifice, human relationships, personal values, human dynamics, moral compass. Doing these things causes the emoting to come over the face. The Ji aspects cause it to be done in articulation, jutting, etc., and the Zhai aspects in resonating, internalizing, gaining equilibrium. But it's really connected because when a Zhai user is doing that, even they're unaware, the Zhai is unaware, but that doesn't change the fact that it's connected to the Ji of their other, and it's connected to the Ji and Zhai of the other mojos that are connected to the individual. Thus, when one of us emotes, we all emote. All humans emote, and as they emote, all the other humans emote with them in some way. As the flex factor of the emoting happens, the other mojos flex in reaction to this. All mojos, including logic-based mojos, they are flexing. It's just a question of its modulation, values-based flexing, or if it's momentum values-based flexing. So you also have the neutralizing. The neutralizing comes from the use of the Zez powers, the logic-based powers. They're doing certain heroic functions for the psyche, for the individual, for humanity. And when they do these, it causes the face and the body to do certain things. So what's on the mind of Zez? What's on the mind of the Zez channel? Let's do it. Let's do some poetic descriptions. Neutralizing emotion, removing the flex factor of values-based criteria that we just talked about, that actually aids when you're dealing with the concept of the system and of perfection. Those concepts, they need clear-cut lines. That's what makes those powers have their magic. All the powers are magic. As you get higher and higher in the powers, and they get more and more tacit, more and more unconscious, all 8 pod powers, they get more magic-like. As their infinite awesomeness goes beyond our current understanding. They're just amazing that way. So it's a form of magic, though, and the form of magic that logic-based powers have is in the clear-cut lines. That's what gives it its abilities as opposed to the other abilities in the psyche, the other abilities in existence. What are these? Well, with the concept of the system and perfection, you get ambition, clarity, thirst for challenge, precision, directness, accuracy, efficiency, dispassion, authoritativeness, logical purity, decisiveness, diagnostics, assessing, experimentation, strategizing, principle understanding, project planning, customizing, organizing, situational logic, scheduling, situational analysis, sequencing, refining, protocol implementation, sharpening, operational procedure enforcement, optimizing, systemic logic, calibrating, going for the win, rectifying, straightforwardness, reactive theorizing, forcefulness, deductive reasoning, systemic relationships and dynamics. Doing that activity causes neutralizing of the synamnia. The synamnia, in this portion, the synesthesion, it neutralizes and straightens its energetic lines, both for its stance, that's perfection, and for its drive, which is the system, which is bracing. Okay, so it needs clean, clear lines. That's what it needs. When it gets this, then it gets its way, which is a more clear, linear way, as opposed to the more wavy way of the flex factor jazz. Both the straight sort of radio, or not radio, because it actually makes sense more like perception. It's a discernment. The straight line of forces and the sort of flex line of forces actually are both lines of force, but sort of like, you know, straight lines and curved lines. You have straight force and curved force. They do different things, and they're both actually necessary. And together, they actually create, say, force and stance. The irresistible force and the immovable object. So that all comes from decision making. When you go forward and why, when you stand and why. Those things actually make up the cynicism of the human race. This trumps any cultural learned ideas of the way things work. This is actually what's happening, so that's there. And then it also trumps any attempt to fake this. The things you're going to see when a person is truly doing that activity, doesn't matter if you're logic-based or values-based, if you're truly using your values-based power and truly using your logic-based power, it will show. Even if you try to act. Naiji are very gifted at shape-shifting. They're very good in method acting and being spies and being comedians, all kinds of things like that, where you take different roles and pretend to be other people. You can't pretend to actually... I can pretend to be an IZ, and I can make it funny, interesting, educational. But I can't hide that I'm an IG unless the other person who's looking at me can't read. If they can read Mojo, then when I stop emoting and I flatten it, my voice changed. I mean, right, this may seem out there in the beginning, but those of you who've been training for a while, you saw it right there. It's just so dramatically different between when I'm trying to actually sound logical versus not. I can't hide the dips in my energy. That's just the way it goes. And same thing for a logic-based mojo. Logic-based mojo, they can do very strong emoting. They can do very strong modulation emoting. I do modulation neutralizing. You can do those very well, very heroically. They can be impressive. They can give your friends confidence. However, it doesn't become something that gives you energy. That's just not something that one can imitate. If you don't have food, you don't have food. And that's just something that you will sort of look psychically peaked or peaked. And those things, once you're able to read it, as those who are studying it now are able to do, then the other things, they're kind of like just maneuvers. They're just maneuvers of that actual true signal, and you can easily see through them. We talked about the inspiration of, say, power to power, like Zhai to Ji and Zai to Z, but also the perception powers. But there's also other kinds of inspiration of energetic exchange, heroic, harmoniously productive energetic exchange. And it goes along with, say, emoting and neutralizing. There are times when emoting is needed, and that's why all mojos have an emoting power. And there's time when neutralizing is needed. When those motifs happen in life, as you see the person actually doing the more heroically appropriate thing to do, whether it be emoting or neutralizing, it makes you feel better, it gives you strength, it gives you comfort as a fellow human. And that's actually just as the powers used, kind of like as part of the overall ship. But then the ship itself has like a baseline. So for example, being around, say for myself, Nai Z, being around Zaini, that gives me a certain feeling. I get an energetic feed. There's the Zai of the Zaini and there's the Z of the Nai Z, but there's also at this point just generally neutralizing, coming to things from a clear-cut position, from a clear-cut intention. These things, they help access certain parts of my synamnia, and in this case, it's my overall Zez channel, which includes not just, it's bigger than just me, because it includes my other. I have Zai consciously, my other, Nijai, actually has Z in my unconscious. So when we are around heroic Zez mojos, it helps put us heroically in touch with our heroic Zez aspects, because I have hardcore humanist as an IG, Nijai has righteous intervener, and it's important how those spirit forms be very strong and very familiar to you. And when I learn my hardcore humanist, I need my righteous intervener to help. So this is a little more advanced now, but in order to study, for example, to study hardcore humanist, I actually have to study all of the other 7 pod power spirit forms. Otherwise, it won't make sense. Hardcore humanist only makes sense, as we mentioned before, in relation to one-way walker and natural law teacher. Without that, it doesn't have proper context. Actually, it does have context without the next in the peak pathway chain of the frenzied fanatic. We've sort of mentioned that before. But also, the hardcore humanist doesn't make sense without the righteous intervener of my Nijai other. So that's another way that's linked. And that particular one is like a channel link. The hardcore humanists for me and righteous interveners, other ones for other mojos, but they're inspirational. They actually have a connection with all the different channels, and they can access it together. So there is a proper like dance unison with the stone facing of a Nai Ji or a Jinai or Jivai or Vai Ji with the anvil of any of these Jai mojos, Jai Ni, Ni Jai, Bi Jai, Jai Vi. Any of those, there is a dance interplay, energetic dance interplay between the stone facing of the Ji mojo and the anvil of the Jai mojo, and vice versa for the logic-based versions of that, but both in the powers and in the mojos. The way they work back and forth is that the levers, they go through the barrier of the conscious to unconscious mind. That doesn't really exist for the synamnia. So for the synamnia, whenever you're working, you're part of a channel. It's important. Like we talked about, for example, when you're actually working, say if Nija or Jailin are actually working on their Jai, we talked about how actually they're also working with the Zai of their other in the composition. They're also working with the conscious discernments of their other, which would be the Ji. So we're getting into layers now, basically, and layers are where it's at. Point is, as you learn all these layers, it naturally takes you to the disciplines that are coming up in the future, which are social alchemy, for example, because you clearly see the need to access your channels and to do that properly. Like, for example, if I want to work on my emoting, I actually need to connect that with the Jai of my other, so I'm doing emoting as an overall synamnia practice. When I'm emoting, it is a conscious and unconscious connected process. Also neutralizing. When neutralizing, it's a combination of my Zai and my other's Z. It's unconscious, but I have a connection to it. I can feel that connection that's part of one channel, the logic-based channel. And having that connection makes me better both, and it's necessary, and then it naturally leads to the next mathematical given, which is other storylines that are nearly related. They also make excellent training for you, excellent heroic development for you. And one of those is, for example, the increase of logic. One that's very comes right away, for example, the Nejez is the Nezez. The Nezez help the Nejez learn about, as a storyline, the Nezez storyline helps heroically, energetically educate the Nejez on how to neutralize, how to be clear cut in things heroically. And vice versa, Nejez, this goes for all mojo, but I'm giving like some example here, is the Nejez actually help the Nezez as a storyline about emoting, about the need for that, the value of that, when you do it, how you do it. So they teach each other these channels. And that's why, again, we're talking about mojo here, and we're reading second gear, but because of the way they interplay, you have to talk about two quadrants, and you have to talk about the conscious and unconscious, and so you have to talk with inspirational, which means you have to talk social alchemy. It's all connected, but that's what makes it so beautiful, that's what makes it so awesome, that's what makes it so fucking true. Again, you must match these up with real life samples, so I'm going to get into like the yang yin here a little bit, but that it doesn't mean anything if you don't actually match it up with clean samples. So you have the emoting is yin to the yang of neutralizing. So the reduction of expression in any way is yang, and the increase in expression is yin. It's important to note though that this emotive neutralizing spectrum happens in the discernment corridor, and the discernment corridor is yang to the yin of the perception corridor. So the whole process, the entire process of emoting and neutralizing is yang. I'll give you now a few examples to work from, just throwing these out here until that little light starts beeping. Some things I'm seeing. One is shades of me. That's a really good way to track something. And you can actually do a shades of me again with storyline to see the emoting and neutralizing relationships of the powers shift. So again, look at the crash courses, look at the samples that Jailene has put out on her channel. And you can take, for example, any of them and take where the values-based power or logic-based power, doesn't matter, whichever it is you want to track, is in the source position. And then do the shades of me of that person so that it moves from source to tandem to offside to polar. You know, so you're rotating up and down. But so that's the same for power storyline, 4 different storylines, and it shifts where the emoting is. And pay attention to that and enjoy that. It's a fascinating experiment to do as you watch the powers ebb and flow throughout him. You can see the powers, you can see the overall storyline of humans weaving in and out of the humans you're watching. It's like there's this huge gallery that makes up the overall story. Artists often do that, where each painting or piece is part of this overall story. That's what it is with humans. The overall human story, each human has got a piece of it they're walking around with that connects to your piece. So, get enlightened. It's the best thing you could be doing with your life. What else? More comedy, more shows you can watch, ones that we're familiar with here because we like to watch them. 30 Rock, it's funny there, but you can see there's actually a lot of emoting and neutralizing because that's often done for comedic effect, emoting and neutralizing. And they have, in the cast there, they have, you know, like Alec Baldwin's Nai Ji, Tina Fey's Nai Z, Kristen Shaw is Ni Zhai, Jane Krakowski is Ni Zai, Jack McBrayer is Zhai Ni. So basically you have a big selection of mojos there, and they're doing different kinds of emoting and neutralizing, meaning they're using, you know, Zhai versus Ji or Z versus Zai, and then they're doing it to different levels. So you actually have values-based people in the cast and logic-based. So watch the show, but go in and take a look at all the actors that are in there, find out what their mojo is, and then watch interviews of them, and then just sit back, kick it, have some nice dinner, make yourself some gourmet goodies, and watch 30 Rock. But knowing who the people are, and you can actually register what you're watching. And kind of like, you know, doing a workout. You know, if you're training an advanced kind of sport, for example, often you have to actually break your training up to like certain days you're working on certain events. If you're training for Ninja Warrior, some days you have to work on the salmon ladder more, and other days you work on, you know, the I don't know, the rope hang or something. So anyway, you actually have these different skill sets that you need to work on, and you can use different shows to do this. So you can use the cast as far as like their mojo, and also the kind of show that it is to be an overall kind of training, but then you can subdivide it within there. So for example, in 30 Rock, you could actually pay attention to the use of Nai and Ni to tell apart the way they do that amongst the comedians, because some are Ni Alpha and some are Ni users, actually Ni Mojos, and some are Nai. And then you actually could also look at their gesturing. You could watch the 30 Rock, and this time I'm going to watch them, but I'm going to pay attention to the fact that some of the actors are directive, some are adaptive. Ooh, I think today I'll pay attention to all their eyes left movements. Anything like this. And one that I would come quite a bit because it has the zingy dialogue is you can really track articulating, resonating and the emoting, neutralizing spectrum in these comedy shows like Scrubs, like 30 Rock, a few others here. We like comedy shows. But the way something is articulated, the way it is resonated, and how much the emoting goes up and bring it up and bring it down, all that actually has a lot to do with comedy. So they do a great deal of that back and forth, all the participants in the casts. What else we have here? Daily Show with Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart's a Genii, but he has lots of different mojos that come on there. He has Nizai, Zaini, like John Oliver. He has Jaini that are there, Naiji. And so he kind of has different people come in and out that work on a show, and they have a variety of articulating powers, resonating powers, and some of them are logic-based and some of them are values-based. He has a nice mix. It's sometimes fun to actually get like a more condensed energy, if that's what you're looking for. Like temples, sometimes the point is to get one where there's fewer mojos in the alchemy. Other times the point of that alchemy is to have more. Sometimes the point is to have one mojo, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, all of them. So for example, like if you look at what's that one called? We like that one a lot. They're always smoking herb. That 70 Show. Okay, that 70 Show. They have a lot of Naiji. There's a lot of Naiji and also several Nijai. So that is actually a Nejez heavy cast. There's 1 or 2 Naiji in there as well. But for that, you wouldn't be seeing as much. That's more good for studying ways Nejez can play comedy. And so that's an excellent way to learn. It's almost like a little mini Nejez temple, although it actually has other mojos too. But as an example of like, it's almost like an impromptu Nejez fest there with some Nejez coming over to have fun with. That's good for learning that sort of thing, but this is a different kind of lesson. So in this kind of lesson, you're trying to learn about like the discernments, the way they're different, maybe the difference between directive and adaptive, whatever. You actually would have a good spread. So for example, in 30 Rock, they actually have both Nai mojos and Ni mojos in the cast, and they actually have logic-based and values-based. So that gives a good way of actually counterpointing. If that's the lesson you're trying to learn, you're actually trying to distinguish between, for example, logic-based and values-based. Scrubs is good because the 4 main actors, 2 are Nejez, 2 are Nejez, so it's good to figure out the difference and watch it for that purpose. So I don't know how much you guys are doing this, but I think you're doing some playlisting already. These are some more like advanced playlisting tips that can help you out. Because humans are playlisting all the time when they actually are around other humans, but you can actually improve that feed or augment that feed, which is important because right now most memes make things sucky for people, by actually choosing your friends through Podlayer, actually finding the kind of people you want to connect with through that, but also the media you choose, music, movies, anything of that nature, interviews you watch. When you do that, you can know what you're watching and the effect. It has a spell effect on you. So the more you actually understand the powers that do it, and you can associate that, you can artistically appreciate it, you know more what's going on, which is good in like a defensive way, but in a sort of bonus stacking way, you actually can appreciate the spell more. For example, if a Naiji is around a Nijai and the persons are heroic to a degree, then there is going to be a lift, inspirational. For example, the Naiji looking at the Nijai's eyes, it gives a lift. However, depending on how aware they are of what's going on, they can interpret it a whole bunch of ways, a lot of them being incorrect interpretations of what's going on. And so when it's interpreted correctly, then all the bonuses from that life possibility, that natural law occurrence that we like to call, a human moment. You have these human moments and you don't actually take all the bonuses that are available there because you don't actually see what fruit are there. Once you're actually able to see it, you can both protect yourself from signals you don't want. You can just see what signals are so you know, and then you can actually deal with things that are not what you want and things that are what you want accordingly. You can be a knowing being, and that's just the kind of being you want to be. It's blinking, so I don't have much time. Colbert versus O'Reilly. I think Jailene and I talked about it a bit on the Yang-Yin gesturing, but you could also watch it again. Like you can revisit things and watch for different stuff. you can there look for the emoting, because when O'Reilly is actually emoting, he really is emoting, and when he is bringing it down with the Zai, he is having to rein it in. As opposed to Colbert, who's a Ni Zai, has the same powers but different order. When he's doing his emoting, there's more of a play to it. He's not really committed to it as much energetically as O'Reilly is, and the chilliness is not really like a break. It's more like his hangout pad. You know, it's his chilly bachelor pad up there in Logic Land. It's not like breaks. So that's a big difference between him and O'Reilly with the same powers. So check that out. What else? Let's see. Jonathan Ross, Eminem interview. That's one that's been discussed before for different reasons. But you can see there, because Jonathan Ross goes between being bracing with his Z, and then when it's not going the way he wants, he goes into the emoting of Zhai. So he does both, and you can see the difference. And then Eminem also, he actually goes back and forth. He actually starts chilly, then he comes out a little bit of G and warms up, and he goes back and forth. So you can actually see the two of them. One is logic-based, and one is values-based, and they both go back and forth between playing it warm or playing it cool. So enjoy that and see what you can get out of it. I don't have much time, less than a minute. Look for logic-based and values-based, the speed that it goes in the face, because often people talk about, ooh, it does go into the cheeks. Emotion goes into the cheeks for all mojos, but the difference is with values-based mojos, it goes up quicker. It goes up quicker, and it has more, for example, flexation of the fine muscles. It's running out of time. For example, take like a Nijai. Go look at all the Nijai that are out there. They actually have more of an apple cheek thing that comes to flexation, and all the Nijai, they have like a sheer cheek. So both very attractive, very appealing, but apple cheek versus sheer cheek, and you can actually see that it has to do because of the emoting they do. Both the powers they use and how far it goes up key. That's a key thing. It goes up more and it goes up differently, and that makes Nijai have sheer cheeks and Nijai have apple cheeks, and I think I'm out of time. Okay, I hope this got through.